Dr. Luz Maria.
And I'm Lisa Frank.
And today's topic is, why is it so difficult to talk about sex? So, my God, it is such a topic that makes people cringe, and some people get very excited about sharing information about this.
And you are so passionate about it that you became a sex therapist.
Yes, I am. I am a sex and intimacy coach, a clinical psychologist, trauma-informed, and I've got so much areas that expertise in this field and tantra, and I work with clients that are into the BDSM world, polyamory world, clients that just want to learn how to have a communication before they even get to the bedroom. Those are very vanilla, but even in the world of vanilla, do not know how to enjoy it. Lots and lots of women that lose their desire.
Vanilla?
Yes, vanilla.
Means?
Vanilla means people that just like very simple sex, very like quiet, men on top, maybe 2 positions or 3 positions. They have a little routine, which is maybe Friday night or Saturday night, once a month routine. It's a really simple vanilla routine that they got down packed, and they follow that pack.
Okay.
So you have that type of vanilla, and there's nothing wrong, by the way. There's nothing wrong. You do what works, but for some of them, then even that stops to work. And the majority of my clientele, Lisa, are women that somewhere after having children...
I need my pillow.
You need your pillow. Women after having babies, and when sex is no longer organic, they kind of lose interest, and that begins to impact the relationship. And of course, sometimes you have men that lose interest, and women are just really looking for an opportunity of that sex and intimacy. And sometimes it's really hard to talk about this.
It is. And why do you think it's so hard to talk about?
I do believe historically, we have been put down. Women have been tortured. Women have been burned. Women have been punished. Women have been put in psychiatric hospitals historically. And if for any reason a woman shows or expresses interest or desires, she must be a prostitute. So women had to be shut down or shut themselves just for survival on its own.
Okay. So, your expertise is in, helping people to improve their sex and intimacy. On my end of things in that area has been trauma, where women experience trauma through rape, incest, things of that nature. And so I'm listening to all of this, and I think that from my perspective or from my area, I'm kind of like the therapist that's dealing with that end of things. But then once they're over that hump, I believe that there are some things that they still have to work on. And the way you had explained it to me the other day, that you said that I asked you, so do you deal with people who are having problems in intimacy because of things that they've been through, whether it be a trauma, right? And so you explained to me that, when 2 people come together, generally, initially, it's very passionate.
Yes.
And the rape or incest that they experience is like a book that's on the floor. And when they're passionate about, the beginning of the relationship and, just wanting to, throw everything off and everything in, then you skip over the book and you don't even notice it there. But then when things start to slow down and it's not that initial passion is no longer there, then you start stumbling over that book.
Yeah. It's kind of like if our memories, what they do in the brain, they get stored. All our
Okay.
memories get stored and they put like in categories.
Okay.
When there's a trauma, it doesn't go into that particular file where you can go back and access and be, relaxed about that information. It kind of gets, it left when the trauma, it gets stuck in the body.
Right.
It kind of gets left there.
Right.
So like you said, at the beginning of the relationship, it's organic, it's new. So it's not going inside the memory. It's actually the new relationship is creating new memories.
Right.
So we are just in the space of passion and fun and activities and whatever's there. Then that passion actually, that organic phase kind of starts to phase. So now we really have to create for ourselves, bring about that intimacy in our lives.
Yeah.
And when you have to look for it and it's not organic, you're going to start looking for it. And because it's not as enjoyable, you don't have all that oxytocin. When you're in the act itself and your body is not lit up by all these amazing chemicals, it actually, the body remembers the touch of a trauma. Then it goes back and it just starts connecting to the past, and then it starts affecting the relationship that you're in.
Yeah, but I think it's great work, and I think it's needed. I personally have had to work with a therapist. It wasn't a sex therapist. So you're my first that I'm meeting. Nice to meet you, sex therapist. So, we talked about it the other day, the molestation that happened in my family. And as a result, I didn't know what I was experiencing. I didn't know that I was experiencing secondary trauma because of what happened to my mother and some of her siblings, and
Yes.
the messages that she passed down about men being dogs, and one part of them may become spiritual and that part doesn't, and things like that. And she may have been saying it to be funny or whatever, at
Yes.
times to be funny, but then at other times just really saying that men are dogs.
Yes.
And I had to, of course, when I learned of this history that existed, a violation from a family member after their mom passed away, when I learned of it, that was a blow in and of itself. And fortunately, I was in therapy, so I was able to work through it, And then, there was those times where, I would kind of freeze up, and not know why. But my therapist was, able to talk to me about that. But a part of me talking about it, I had to also talk to my, at the time, spouse about that. And so that we can work through it,
Yes. And one of the words that you mentioned, Lisa, that's really important is you said ancestral, like it got passed down. Now, if you imagine what your mom learned and got passed down to her, what her mother passed down to her, and we go back generations, and there has been so much rape and so much abuse down the line through women's history.
Yeah, starting with slave owners.
Yeah, slave owners, and even further back.
Wow.
We are actually talking about earlier on, because when the whole world of marriage was established, before marriage did not exist, but one of the reasons marriage existed is so that you can actually be able to pass your sibling, your children, in this particular, your boys, the men can pass their boys, property.
Yeah.
So it's about choosing a wife to be able to have, so it's like a biology body, like I need this body. So before, women were selected to make sure they wouldn't die during childbirth. So you have your children that would be able to inherit. So the woman was pretty much used for a certain service. She's going to be the service for childbearing. And the girls that got molested were the girls and got pregnant. Those were the girls that work in the brothels, the prostitutes. So they became two basic roles for women. Either you were in a marriage or you were actually worked in a brothel. That's pretty much what existed back then. And in the marriage, the way sex looked like was for a service of your husband.
Right.
So there was no conversation of pleasure. It was just of service.
Yes.
Yeah. And in the brothel was a service for the man. And some women in the brothels learned to enjoy it or pretend to enjoy it. And many, of course, in the brothels got raped, like they still do.
And I think that, you mentioned the word service. And, I do believe that in a marriage that we're there to serve each other and to make each other happy, right?
Yeah.
And sex is not a bad thing, but we didn't have those kinds of conversations.
No. There were no conversations.
I mean, my conversation with my mother, it was, don't do it or you're going to get pregnant. And I didn't want that, so I saw what happened to the older sisters, so I was like, yeah, let me stay away from that till I get married and can manage what may come out of it. Yeah. Maybe a result.
It's really interesting you say that. Remember, my mother, of course, never explained anything to me. Not even about my period, not about nothing. But I remember it's when I started to date at 16, my mother, before I would date, I said, Mom, I'm leaving. And she would say, it's better, this was in Spanish, it's better a drop of blood than a piece of meat. And I was like, what?
What in the word? Oh, I can't wait to hear this explanation.
And I would ask Mom, what did you mean?
And a piece of meat.
And I would like, Mom, what did you mean? And all she would is she would repeat it every time I would go. Like, I couldn't get it. So it was.
Was this every time you got your menstrual cycle?
No, every time I would go on a date.
Okay.
Every time I would go on a date.
Better is a drop of blood
than a piece of meat. And in Spanish, it's mejor una gota de sangre que un pedazo de carne.
Okay.
Just like that, literally translated. Un pedazo. So finally I got it. It's better for you to have your period than have a child in the womb. That's what she meant.
Okay.
That was my mother's contribution to my sex education.
Oh my God. So I guess you had to wait until you got to school to learn the real deal and around other children or whatever.
I went to a Catholic school.
Oh, okay.
I went to a Catholic school.
Guess they wasn't having sex education there either.
Yeah, actually we did, but it was more about not getting pregnant.
They always want to stop it. How about you talk to your son and tell him keep his stuff in check?
See, that's part of the conversation that is missing in our culture, because a boy gets rewarded. A boy gets rewarded.
Free reign.
Yeah, gets rewarded. And some boys, even if they don't have sex, they pretend they have, and they take the girl's name in vain out there, And so it's so difficult to talk about sex because the consequences. And girls is about don't get pregnant, and boys get rewarded.
Yeah. And even, in the African American culture, the Pentecostal community, when a girl is in church and she gets pregnant out of wedlock, she used to have to go before the whole congregation and apologize. And, it just brings to light how, when something unwanted happens as a result of anything, we still blaming the woman.
I'm curious, is this only the woman that gets to go up? Or
yes,
the boy?
That's just the girl.
Wow. That I did not know.
Yeah, just the girl has to go before the congregation and apologize. They don't do it much anymore that I know of anyway. I mean, of course, you still have some strict Pentecostals, and they may do it, but, to me, it's been a as far as I know, it's been a practice that doesn't really exist now because, for one thing, the church's stance on abortion. And, this is the thing. You can't tell a young lady, we don't want you to do that, and then turn around and ostracize her and not support her in raising the child.
Yes, I so agree.
It's a, that's a contradiction.
And and yet there is no education on sexuality.
Right.
One of the pieces that is missing in the education is talking about pleasure. Mm-hmm. We want to pretend it does not exist. Mm-hmm. And mainly is for the boys.
Yes.
Because the conversation of pleasure and sex is part of its taboo. Mm-hmm. If you like sex and you enjoy sex, therefore you must be a hoe.
Well,
so you have a lot of things that are happening in our society about who is okay to talk about. So young girls don't go to their parents.
And of course, so it's not to date ourselves or anything, but we're from the generation where, we've seen the difference between years ago where they didn't talk about anything on TV. Lucy and Ricky slept in separate beds, right?
Yes.
And they didn't talk about anything. We just knew she got pregnant and had little Ricky. we didn't know. Like, I don't know how they did that, but okay. Yeah. They was in separate beds, but okay. So, we've seen it go from not talking about it, not even presenting the husband and wife, to sleeping in bed, to now the media showing any and everything on TV, to the point where even primetime television, you have to sit and watch with your kids because you just never know. Years ago, Disney was for kids, but now Disney seems to be pretty much kind of for adults, right?
In
some ways, right? So we went from seeing from a period of time where nothing was shared about it to now everything is kind of being exposed. And I think about even the differences, and I, talk to my mother, because she said, I never want to have kids. Yeah. And there's 6 of us. And I said, okay, well,
how did that happen?
Tell me how that happened. She said, well, I didn't know what I was doing. She said, I went to the doctor, and I told the doctor, I don't know what's wrong with me. My stomach is just nauseous all the time. She said my stomach was just nauseous all the time, and sometimes I feel a little pain or whatever. And the doctor said that would be called 5 months pregnant. And I said, okay, Ma, but then you had 5 more children. And she said, I still did not know what I was doing. Nothing was ever discussed. It wasn't, it wasn't, for them, it wasn't pleasurable. Of course, as an adult child, we talk further about things, and it wasn't pleasurable. It wasn't presented as something that could be pleasurable for the woman. You're just basically there to serve the man.
Yeah. And I'm going to be really blunt, and I hope our audience is totally okay. Giving another example of my own relatives, and my auntie no longer lives with us, or her husband. She shared with me how she couldn't get pregnant, and she hated sex. Mm-hmm. So she didn't understand why she couldn't get pregnant, hated sex. So she went to the doctor, and it turns out that neither of them were experiencing sex. Mm-hmm. He was penetrating her anally.
Okay.
Isn't it hard to hear that?
I'm going to say okay. Because, we talked about yesterday about how, the muscles get broken down, in that act, and they no longer have the tension and the flexibility needed to push things out. and how that causes damage, can cause damage. And, yeah. Talk to a nurse, a doctor, and all kind of situations come in the hospital. So
yes, it
we
is.
talked about
yes,
that.
And I will explain. I know this is. Can you see? She technically shared a little bit. Because it's so hard to talk about this.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about.
It's so hard to talk about.
Yes, one of the things that does occur why a lot of people end up in the hospitals at emergency is when they're not really informed about sexuality, and one of the practices is putting things in the cavity anally, and when you put things in the cavity, people think you're just going to push it out. Well, what happens sometimes you can't, because there's two muscles that happen, and one is more relaxed and the other one is really tight. And those muscles are needed in order to hold our feces up. So what happens when people put cavities up there, there's a consequence. Sometimes those things get stuck and you got to go to the ER and get them out. And the things are sometimes pretty huge, and as people are curious, and pornography kind of promotes all of that stuff, and they don't know, and that's one of the
trying stuff they seen on TV.
Yep. I'm wondering, Lisa, how difficult is it? This one, I'm looking at your face.
I had the same look I had. We talked about it yesterday.
So,
okay.
To each his own.
I mean, I do want to know, while we're in that space, I've had clients, who've been sodomized, and of course those things led to addiction, and I'm talking about males as well, just to deal with that, where they've been, molested and penetrated in that area, and the trauma that comes with it. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
About the trauma?
Yeah.
Yeah, the trauma when the most important...
Because it's one thing when it's willing that you're putting stuff up there.
And I think it's just in general, whether it's an anal or it's inside the vagina.
Right.
Part of what that the value and the importance of sexuality is about safety. You can't, if you don't feel safe with whom you're with, you can't allow the brain and the body to connect, because we have something called like brakes and accelerators in our brain that allows us to kind of happen the emotions and the activities in our bodies. And the reason we have these brakes and accelerators, so you can imagine you're having the most wonderful experience, and suddenly one of your kids comes in, you have to be able to have the brain all of a sudden to shift and make a decision. It's the biology of our bodies are made to be able to react, to take care of oneself, to protect oneself. So in the sexuality, there is those mechanisms that we have, which is part of our own protection.
Okay.
So when something is done unto you without you volunteering and not feeling safe, what you start putting is on the brakes on your body. So when you put the brakes on your body, there is this huge mechanisms that are actually happening in the brain.
Okay.
There is like the brain, and then you have the midbrain. So in order to be excited, you need to get the midbrain. It's just like the middle of the brain involved.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have actually this movement in the midbrain that then communicates to the body, says, release hormones, release all of this stuff. But the moment you start thinking about, I'm not feeling unsafe, what is happening, you're questioning, or you even start being intimate and you look at yourself and like, oh my God, look at my belly, it's so fat, how embarrassing. Or you start thinking of, oh my God, what I got to do today. As soon as you do that, you get out of that cycle and in the brain. Yes, the brain, you actually have like these connectors.
Yeah.
You cut them off and you actually just go into the forebrain, which is the one that the orchestra of our brain, and you go into that conversation. And when you do that, you dry up. And if you're feeling unsafe, When there's a violation, your body is no longer, so what it does, it cringes. So when there's trauma, it's not just talk therapy. Actually, the trauma now we have more research, gets stored also in the body. So a lot of the work now when it comes to intimacy is looking and identifying where in the body something gets stuck. A lot of trauma, and it's not just sexual trauma, other types of trauma, and also release that trauma in the body. So now what is used is a combination of talk therapy with somatic therapy, which is more of the body. So that's what kind of happens in this biology of who we are.
And I know medically some women have issues with their pelvic floor.
Yes.
And a lot of women are not aware that there are actually physical therapists who can work with you on that so that you're, able to enjoy intimacy better. And I just learned about that like a year ago. I was talking to someone who's working on her doctorate in that, and I was just amazed. I was amazed. I said, wow, and then she, kind of explained some of the procedures to me and stuff like that. And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's called a women's health physical therapist
for pelvic.
women's health.
Yeah. It's because we have all those muscles. It's kind of when we get pregnant, we have all those muscles in the pelvis. And when we're being intimate, we actually contract them and let them go. So you have the hormones, you have the pelvic floor. So when there's trauma and somebody trying to violate you, what it is, not because the pelvic floor, there's also muscles for the man and the woman. What it is, you contract those muscles and you fight really hard. And then whatever, it depends on the...
They feel like they've been in a fight.
Yes. And and then you can actually even see medically with the doctors, obstetricians, can actually look at the woman, because some women that have had such severe trauma and continuous trauma, the color of their vulva and around their clitoris changes.
Wow.
From so much trauma.
Wow.
And it just stays like that.
Wow, isn't that something?
It is. It really is something.
And what would you say the age range is of women that you need? Because we're talking about why it's so difficult to have this discussion, and we were kind of talking about women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s.
Yes.
Because obviously they're still doing it because. At one point, the nursing home had more AIDS patients than anybody. I was looking at the studies because at the time I was working in the methadone clinic and doing Planned Parenthood coordination for HIV/AIDS patients. And when I began to study it and look at the stats, I'm like, seniors, geriatric, what? What are they doing? They say, oh, yeah, they're having a good time. And then a lot of times, they're getting abused, too, by, workers who are bringing that,
That bringing that in. See, we think that after a certain age, women or even men, and what happens with women can continue to be orgasmic. The more orgasmic they are through their life, it is more likely they will continue to be orgasmic. Now, the men will have trouble with erection, but their brain is still active.
Yes.
And it really creates like this horrible frustration for men. And see, for men, they can actually see it. And so there's the decline in their body and their function. And it's just affects them, and they have a hard time. Is because my thinking and my body feels like it's still there, and even more prowess because I've got more information, more desire, more curiosity, more awareness, but my body is not responding. It is such a turmoil, a heartbreak.
It is
for men.
Well, I was speaking to a therapist friend of mine the other day. Well, not a sex therapist like you, but we were talking about this problem of impotency that some men experience. And I was surprised to find out that sometimes Viagra doesn't work.
Yes. Yes, and the thing about it, not every man can take Viagra. And
Because of other health issues.
yes, if they have health issues like diabetes or some heart problems, their doctors will not prescribe them. And one of the things that is happening that is of a real concern, there's a lot of under the table selling of these drugs to men.
Yes, yeah, because I know somebody whose spouse did that. And the doctor was like, "Are you crazy? Like, are you trying to have a heart attack or something? Like, don't buy medication." They're not even looking at your history. They know nothing about your medical condition, the medications that you're taking that can be contraindicative to that pill. They don't know anything about you. And you're getting this medication, you're looking to end your life.
Yes, you are. And there's some men out there that feel, you know what, I really do not have that bad of a heart problem. I'm okay. I can take Viagra. But then if they take like sleeping pills, so sometimes it's like it may not be something that they know, but it could be something over the counter that may be. So it is such an important, I'm so glad we're doing this here on Different Voices that we can share. It's the value to have this information for the man to go and to confirm and be checked. Yeah, and it's really great because...
So okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say because one of our future topics is going to be about toys, so be waiting for that soon.
Interesting. So, back to it not working for some people, besides the medical issues and it being contraindicative to other medications and stuff, why is it that it won't work for? Because I think kind of what a lot of men don't realize, I was watching a show about, well, she kind of helps people. She just presents you on her show and lets you tell who you are, what you're looking for, whatever. And people who are watching can reach out to you on, social media if they're interested in you. And this one lady, I want to say she was about 55.
Okay.
And she asked her what she was looking for and what age is good, and they usually give a range. And she said that she didn't want anybody over 45. And so the lady said, "What? Like, why?" And she said, because when men are over 50, they're not realistic about the change that's happening in their body. And talk a little bit about that, because really it's a muscle like any other muscle.
Yeah, well,
right?
It's a little bit more complicated. For the men, it's actually blood flow.
Oh, yes.
There's a blood flow. There's
issue.
a blood flow issue. But the thing about it is that what creates a problem is that our definition for sex, in order for it to have, you have to have an erect,
right,
penis,
okay,
and the vagina.
Okay.
And the truth of it, we are so limited in our definition that we really miss on the game, on the connection, on the whole gamut of what intimacy and sex can look like.
Right.
Yeah, they're so used to like being busy working, and they get home and they're used to for that 30-minute, 20-minute, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so they're locked in that thinking. So one of the things I do with my clients is I teach them a lot about intimacy and connection outside of the bedroom.
Right.
So it's really important that when I work with couples that they leave with me different ways where they feel so satisfied, where that touch and that connection, where they feel loved and connected with actually no penetration.
Right.
Because life will change, and if you can experience that connection without it, it is amazing. So when that shows up when the actual penetration and the orgasm, you know, the ejaculation happens. That's just kind of like the end of it all, which is an amazing experience. But it really is the journey.
Yeah,
it really is a journey.
Well, everything in life is about the journey, and most of the time we all resent the journey and just want to get to the destination in every area of life, you know. So it's great that you know, look, it may be 7 a.m. and you're not getting busy until midnight, but you know, you can pinch me.
That's
at 7 a.m. We can work our way up to it, you know?
Yes, we can. So we're getting ready to wrap up. We've got about 2 minutes. This topic really lends itself for so really much. Does. And it is a taboo topic.
It is.
Where some women, they will see me alone and they say, Dr. Luz, how do I even present this topic to my husband? I don't even know how, because he's gonna feel
you don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yes,
and what you not satisfied? Listen, that's why I had to have my trusted pillow here today, because like this, I knew it was gonna get steamy. So I needed something to brace myself for what was coming.
Beautiful color orange. I love that's my color orange when I talk about this subject, by the way. But I did not bring any orange. All right, we got 1 minute. Let's just wrap it up. What do you want to share, Lisa?
You know, I just wanted to, you know, thank you for sharing your expertise in this area, because it is important. It's an important topic. You know, it's also carrying on the conversation that we talking about people connecting, and everybody's having such a difficult time. Look at during the pandemic, that was a telltale sign that people weren't connecting, because abuse went up, marriages fell apart.
Yes,
you know, and that was a telltale sign that people weren't connecting in a way that they should have been. And you know, as you said, as a Latina, some Latinas will say, you're doing what?
Yes,
you're what? You know, but somebody's got to do it, and I'm glad that, you know, you saw it as something important and a way to help people.
It's a value, and I know we've shared this before. Touch is such an important thing, and you know, I want to close with that. The value of touch is something that we have already done research, and I do believe we need more research. Not having touch growing up, I also believe is a contribute to some of the abuse that happens. Not knowing how to approach someone to feel connected and loved, and it's the only thing they understand is the sex, but it's really how do I connect and feel loved. So anyway, just
okay.
We gotta bring this topic next season.
This was another great episode of Different Voices.